Hi everybody, welcome to the dungeon. My name is Robin and today is Flameworking 102.17. Every now and then, if I'm working on marbles, I get this sudden urge to just smash them and flatten them and just to see what the pattern would look like. I guess today's the day because I've been making marbles and I've been flattening them and smashing them and making these really fun lollipop pendants. This is an exciting technique. It has a 90-degree axis change to it, and your metal punties are really going to come in handy for this method. So without further ado, let's get right into it. As always, I hope you're all doing safe and well out there. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time in the dungeon. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, as I do with most of my pendants that I make, I am going to start out by making the loop, which is nothing more than a bead on a mandrel. So I'm not really great at making loops right off of the pendant. And if you are having an issue with that as well, then just make a quick bead on whatever size mandrel you want the hole to be. And I will put the bead right in the doorway of the annealer. And I have my annealer running at 1,000 degrees, so it's acting like an oven that I can take it out of and then heat up without worrying about it breaking. Anyway, so we're going to leave that in the oven for now. And I'm going to do my best to keep up with myself with this demonstration here. And so what I want to do for this pendant, I want to make this really nice, big, large disc. So I want to start out with my base color. And in this case, I'm just going to use black. And I will just heat up a huge gather, just as big as I can get. And I'm using a 8 to 9 millimeter black rod. And I'm just going to add as much as I can off the end of a metal punty and just start rolling it out a little bit to get a nice smooth shape that I can add some more glass to. And you want to make sure that when you roll this out, or when you add your glass, make sure the punty's really hot, or your glass is going to just kind of fall off like it did for me right here. So if that happens, don't freak out. Just do your best to get a pair of tweezers. Don't burn yourself. Grab a bit of glass and shove it back onto your mandrel. And you should be good to go. So I put that back on there, and just for a little extra reinforcement, I will add some black glass to the base where the mandrel is. And then I figured I'd add a little bit more just because I feel like I needed it just a little bit bigger to add all this color around it. Okay, so after I've rounded that out and smoothed everything down, I'm going to start by adding my Dichro strip. And I'm just going to start flashing the clear part in the glass or in the heat. You don't want to heat up the Dichro side, only the clear side. If you heat up the Dichro side, it could burn off and leave a scum kind of mark on your glass. So be real careful when you add your Dichro strip. And this is the clear Dichro. This is like a Teal Crinkle. And I'm gonna spend some time heating it up, just the clear, and then flattening the edges down and kind of getting the clear part of the Dichro strip to kind of flow over the edge just a little bit and kind of keep it inside. I just don't want the edge of the Dichro to be exposed to the flame. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, now the second Dichro strip I'm using is like a mermaid crinkle, and I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to add it right to the opposite side of my gather. And then same thing, I'm going to spend a little bit of time flattening it down with a knife and making sure that the clear is all the way over the Dichro. Now you can add the Dichro last after you add the colors. If you do, it will be a little bit more raised up, but I wanted to see how the Dichro would look a little bit more in the glass because we're going to add some clear later on. I wanted these to have a little bit of dimension. Okay, so now we're going to add all of this color, and I do have the colors written down for you in the description. Of course, you can always use whatever colors that you like. This is a great pendant to explore new colors or use your favorite colors. Do a rainbow or do all different shades of one color would look great. Either way, I'm going to lay 3 shades down in between the dichro on one side, and I'm just going to spend just a few seconds to make sure that those are where I want them to be. You know, I didn't add them perfectly. It's a little sloppy, but when you go to do the twist, that all will even out in the end. Okay, so my second set of colors are kind of like the orange and reds here, and I'm just going to add those to the other side. I barely had enough room to add this red, but I thought if I just make sure it's a little bit more on top of that orange color, I just wanted to make sure I'm not hiding any of that dichro. Because when you go to do the twist and the dichro is set underneath that clear glass, you'll lose some of that dichro in your twist if you're not careful. And if you're worried about that, then put your dichro on after you add your color. Okay, so now to further make this whole pendant pop, I'm going to sloppily add my black intense stringer here. And of course, the one time that I do this on camera is the time that the stringer got away from me. And I just want to add the stringers right in between where the colors are. And if I'm worried about getting the black stringer a little too close to one of them, like I am about to do right here, I add this one super close. And it was hard for me to see the difference of colors because when they're hot, they look real similar. So I'm just going to take a second to push that bit of stringer down just a little bit more. Okay, now that we have all of our color on, I just want to smooth things out real quick and then spend a few seconds to just kind of start heating up the base of it. Making sure everything is in there and it's hanging on to the mandrel. You don't want it to fall off at this point. Okay, so I'm going to do my first of many kind of pinch and pulls from the end. And I want to take all this glass off into one tiny point. And I'll do that a couple of times to get the smallest point possible. And that little point is going to be important later on. But for now that I have that point, I'm going to go ahead and start to just kind of smooth the rest of this gather out because I want to encase the whole thing in clear before I move on. But first, I want it all smooth so when I do add the clear, I'm not trapping any bubbles inside. Now when I add my clear, I am using like an 8 to 9 millimeter clear rod, and I will always overlap slightly on every swipe that I do, making sure that I go all the way from the top all the way to the bottom, and then I'll add a little bit more to the bottom if I think I need it. Now once I have that done, I want to just pull the clear glass down over that punty a little bit. I want to make sure that when I pull this punty out, all of the clear around it comes out as well. I know it looks sloppy, but we'll clean it up in a minute here. But for now, let's re-clean the top of, or the end here. And I'm just going to pull that out 1 or 2 more times because I want the clear and everything to come to that perfect little point again. And that's going to be the perfect point to punty up on. And you want to be careful not to overheat that point because the color, if you're not careful, the color will start to spill out over the clear again. So you want to add your punty right to that spot. And I am using a 3/32 of an inch punty there, a very thin punty. I want that punty to be as small as I want the spiral point to be. Well, let's put it that way. Okay, so I spent all this time very quickly heating up the glass that was on the other side and pulling that punty out. And it's really sloppy looking, so I want to take a good amount of that color and the clear off of there to start a nice, very even point of color happening. Again, I want all the color coming to the same point, right in the center. You can pull that out as many times as you need to until you're comfortable with how small the point is. Okay, so let's go ahead and punty up this other side. And you notice how the glass tapers out towards the punty? Well, that's really going to come in handy, and I want to do that to the other side. The other side's kind of inward, but if I just heat the shoulder up for a bit and bring it out of the flame, I can kind of tug right here, and you'll see that that glass is now mimicking the other side. It's now at a taper. Okay, now let's go ahead and start doing some spiraling. All right, so when I do my spiral, what I'm doing here is I have my heat focused on the shoulder of the glass. I don't want it focused on the thin point where the punty is because it'll get too hot. But if you just focus on the shoulder, that heat will travel into where your punty is and you can have much more control over your twist. And now when you do this twist, do your best not to get a whole bunch of like, I don't know, like ruffles in it, if you know what I mean, like those, the twist. You want it to be as smooth as possible. It can be a little wrinkly, but try to keep it from getting too kind of twisted up on itself. Okay, so I turned everything around, so now I can focus on the other side, and I'm going to do a backwards twist. So you'll see this is kind of forming into what we might call a wigwag shape. So I want the center line to have a nice kind of wedge shape to it, and I will make sure that both, like everything is nice and even, both spirals here. So I'm heating one spiral and then kind of heating the other one to make sure that it's nice and even and that all the glass in the center is kind of has that same kind of V pattern to it. Okay, so now I just took off that one punty because everything is looking good here. And at this point, I want to kind of not compress everything. I want to smooth it out, but I also want to start rounding it out. And I'll start by rounding out the side where there is no punty. And once that's kind of starting to get round and everything's looking good, I will be ready to make this whole axis change transfer. And now that I'm ready to do that, I want to use a glass punty because I don't want this to go into the glass. Okay, I want it to just rest on top of the surface. So I'm doing a kind of a warm punty. Make sure it doesn't become part of your glass. And then very carefully heat the metal of your punty up, and that will allow everything to come out as a very tiny point. Now what I'm going to do here is grab another punty, and I'm going to insert it, just a very small amount, into the center of where the color is. And this will become the top of the pendant. All right, now we're ready to break that side off. There's a little bit left over, so I'm just gonna break that off, and I was lucky. I got a beautiful clean break there. Oh, I was like just stressing out right there. Okay, so now this is looking so cool. I love the way this looks, and you could totally just finish this off as a marble if you want to, just by rounding it out and putting a clear punty on one side and kind of cleaning up the other side. But we're going to take it one step further and make a nice big pendant out of this. And you could press it down wherever you want. But if you want that really cool lollipop look, you're going to press it down right on the spiral. But before I start doing any pressing, I want to make sure it's nice and round and everything is smooth and ready to go. Because once we have this pressed down, we want to quickly finish things up. Okay, so here's my final pass in the marble mold. This is like my 1 1/4, a little bit more inch marble mold. Comes in handy for so many things. Okay, so now I am ready to flatten this out. And I'm going to just get everything as hot as I can. And then lay it on my graphite pad, and with the graphite paddle I will flatten down and then lift up and turn it and flatten again, and just make sure that you're not pressing too hard. I'm going to do this several times, so I'm going to press it 3 times because I don't want to over press it. And I like the way this looks, and I do notice that it has a slight wedge to it. So I just want to heat that up and flatten it one more time, and then we'll be ready to fire polish. Ooh, I love the way this looks. Okay, so now I'm going to start to do my fire polishing very gently and methodically all around just one side of the piece. And when that looks really glassy and smooth, you definitely want to let that side cool down, even if you have to blow on it real quick. And once that side gets a little darker again, then it's easier to accomplish fire polishing the other side without the whole pendant starting to move and melt. All right, this looks great. I'm really happy. Okay, so now I want to put my final punty on. And again, this is another punty that is going to come off very easily, so you want to be careful here. I have a slightly hot punty and a warm-ish piece of glass. Once you put the punty on here, don't flash it again. Just go ahead and heat the metal up on the punty from the other side and remove that, and you should only have a little tiny bit of glass left. And now I'm going to grab my my little hook bead from out of my annealer and give it a quick flash in the flame. And then what I'm going to do is just dip the end of the mandrel in water so I don't burn myself when I go to grab it later on. Okay, so now I'm going to just heat the pendant where I want to stick it and heat my bead up as well. And there we have a nice little the pressure right here. You know, when the soft glass is hot on both sides, it will instantly melt together. So that's a really nice thing about this type of glass. Now, once everything is looking good for me, I'm going to go ahead and break this off and cross my fingers. And it looks great, but my bead release broke and it's all over the place. So I'm going to try to fire polish the bottom with this really hot graphite block. Make sure it's hot. And I do try to show you guys, but it's just not working. So I'll let you see the final pictures. And on that note, I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was great fun to make it. And I'll see you next time in the dungeon.